What is up YouTube? I'm Royal, I'm rank 1 Wild Rift, and welcome to the patch 7.0 tier list. So for the last few months, what I've been doing is for these bigger patches like 7.0, 6.3, 6.2, 6.1, I've been doing these longer tier lists where I kind of make the tier list in the video and I give my thoughts and explain why each champion is where. And obviously we're going to go more in depth on the champions that have been most impacted by the changes. So before we even begin with the Baron lane, I'd like to do a quick little intro to kind of highlight what the main changes of the patch were and why that affects so many champions. So the biggest change is the new items. We've had two new items that are extremely impactful and have really pushed a lot of champions to be really broken, and that's Spear of Sojin and Rage Blade. Yes, we've had some tank items and we've had some changes to other items, but those two changes I feel like are the biggest from the patch, and they have really impacted the strength of certain champions. I don't think that the items within themselves are necessarily OP, however their interactions with a few champions are just really OP. So I wonder how Riot is going to go ahead and balance this for future patches. Are we going to see nerfs on certain champions? Are we going to see the items adjusted? And so on. We've obviously had many item changes that have kind of changed the strength of different champions. Now, the map within itself hasn't really changed the champions too much. I think scaling champions have been slightly buffed as snowballing isn't as hard anymore. However, the new Baron has proven quite effective at sieging, so I also think sieging champions have benefited quite a bit. So if you are able to control the early game and then siege down the enemy team, you can definitely win without really playing scaling. However, I do think scaling has kind of received a pretty big buff as compared to previous patches where it was all about snowballing in the early game. With all that being said, I think we're going to jump straight into the Baron lane. And so for our first Baron lane champion, we are going to have Camille. Camille has been one of the, I guess, most neutral champions in this patch. She hasn't really received any major buffs or any major nerfs. She doesn't really make great use of the new items. You can build Sojin. The nice thing about Camille is because she does deal a lot of mixed damage, now you actually have the option of building Blade of the Ruined King on her. Since before Blade of the Ruined King was only physical vamp, and now it's mixed vamp, it's omni vamp, so her true damage or magic damage will also get a heal. So that's the only real change in her, but not much has happened. Darius, I have tried Sojin Darius and I've tried to make him work as much as possible, but I actually think he's one of the weaker champions even in A tier. A lot of his bad matchups have gotten buffed, including the Ambessa, the Riven, even the Fiora, which is kind of like a 50-50 matchup, I'd say. But it feels like Darius just doesn't really have a lot of good matchups. He's still fine against some tanks, but he's just not really a great choice. Moving on to Mundo. So I feel like a lot of people thought that the change to Warmogs would make Mundo really strong. You can go Warmogs and get that additional healing. But in reality, Warmogs doesn't easily fit into his build. So most of the time you're going to go Heartsteel on Mundo, right? And then you're going to pair that up with either Sunfire Cape, which did receive a small nerf, or Titanic Hydra, but most of the time Sunfire Cape. Now you do have the magic resist option, I can't even remember what that item is called, but that's not going to be as strong as Sunfire Cape or Titanic, so for the most part you're probably going to go Sunfire Cape. After that, you're most likely going to go Thornmail. You're going to be going for that anti-heal, that extra armor, you're going to be going for Thornmail. So in reality, after that 3-item core, yes, you can get Warmog's 4th, or you can get earlier and then stall out your Thornmail or your Sunfire Cape, which you kind of need for the wave clear. So it just doesn't really feel like Mundo received a buff from this change, and it feels like tanks in general, even though we did get more tank items, didn't really have a big change overall. I wouldn't call the new items a big buff or anything for most champions, so I'm gonna put Mundo in A tier. He's still a good pick, obviously, if you like playing tanks, especially against other tanks. Mundo is gonna do really well, but I can't justify putting him any higher than that. Moving on to Fiora, and we're gonna immediately put her into God tier. I mean, like, what is there to say about this champion? She's just unbelievably OP, and she's only become stronger in this patch. Blade Ruin King is now a decent item on her, since you can get Omnivamp from her ultimate. You can chase down enemy champions with the Blade Ruin King passive. Spear of Sojin is also viable on her. While it might not be the most OP item on her, it's still viable, so she gets another option, and she does really well against most of the meta Baron laners as well. Even though she might kind of, I wouldn't say struggle. Fiora doesn't struggle against anything, but she might kind of go even against the Ambessas or the Rivens if you don't really know how to play the matchup too well, or the Aurelias, I guess. But I can't justify putting Fiora anywhere below God tier. She was the best champion last patch, and she has only received maybe slight buffs since, indirect slight buffs, so I'm gonna go ahead and put her in God tier. Next up, we have Garen, who will also be going into A tier. Garen is a decent champion if you don't really know what you're doing, especially in the Baron lane. You can go full tank on him, or you can go bruiser on him, or you can even go AD on him. And if the enemy Baron laner doesn't really know what to do, you can very easily neutralize them. So I think Garen continues to be one of the best champions at the stonewalling, but he's not really gonna do much in terms of carrying games, so we can't really put him any higher than A tier. Next up, we have Gragas. Gragas is a decent champion, but he's gonna also have to go into A tier. I think his tank build is alright. I think he's a champion that can actually go the new Warmogs. You can go the hybrid AP options, or you can just go full AP. The main issue with Gragas is if you go tank, he's just not as good as other tanks in reality. And if you go AP, you're more likely than not to ruin your team comp. However, if your team comp can compensate and can fit an AP top laner, then Gragas can be alright. However, he's not going to be as strong as some of these best top laners, so I can't put him any higher. Gwen is also going to go into S tier. She received steady buffs throughout the last patch cycle of 6.0 to 6.3. But the main issue with Gwen is that she received a slight nerf from the Riftmaker changes, but a possible slight buff with Psychic Projector in the later stages of her build. The problem with Psychic Projector is that most games are kind of decided at 3 items, right? By 3 items, that's when Dragon Soul spawns. That's when the Baron will likely be. 4th item is usually when Elder Dragon will spawn. So if it does get to that point in the game, yes, Gwen does technically get buff. But usually for your first 3 items, you're doing like Nashor's, Riftmaker, Deathcap, and it will be a slight nerf. She's still going to be an S tier champion. She's great in the 1v1, scales amazingly well, right? But overall, I don't think she's necessarily received a buff or anything like that. And again, the Psychic Projector buff, it's so late into the game for most champions that it's not going to be truly impactful on their core gameplay. It's only going to make champions that were already strong in the late game that can build it, like Ryze or Gwen, even stronger. But because of the Riftmaker change, I don't think I can really say that she's better than the champions like Camille or equal to champions like Fiora, right? One of the most underrated champions, I would say, is Irelia, which is next up, and I'm gonna put her in A tier. The problem with Irelia in the Baron lane is that she doesn't have a lot of good matchups. She suffers against a lot of the bruisers, but my opinion on her has recently changed. I think if you know what you're doing with Irelia, and you are in a decent matchup, you can actually take over games. But again, the issue is that her late game does suffer quite a bit compared to most champions in the Baron lane. However, we're gonna put her in A tier. Oh, one thing I haven't really mentioned in the Baron lane is that you do gain more XP and more gold. Is it more gold? It's definitely more XP than previous patches. So the kind of like strong 1v1 duelists that want to soak up this XP and kind of carry will be a little better as compared to tanks that don't really care about resources, right? They just care about heartsteel stacks and just being a beefy front line for your team. Next up, we have Jax, who I could put in God tier, to be honest, but I'm gonna put in S tier. I think Jax is an extremely strong champion in the right matchup. While Riftmaker does kind of hurt him, he's not really gonna be building Riftmaker anymore. He's probably one of the champions that suffered the most from this change, since he deals a lot of physical and magic damage, right? And now Riftmaker only buff his magic damage. However, Jax does benefit from Spear of Sojin. I've seen not a lot of people build Spear of Sojin on Jax, but I do think it's actually one of the better users of Spear of Sojin, right? Having your third ability in a super low cooldown is massive. And the Blade of the Ruined King item, which used to be core on Jax before we really got the rework on Jax, right? It was on the previous Jax. But now it's becoming pretty viable on Jax again, since you're getting that Omnivamp from your magic damage that you're dealing. So I do think that Jax has overall benefited. I don't think it's enough to put him into God tier, but he's definitely one of the stronger S tier champions. Next up in the tier list, we will have Jace, who I think is an S tier champion. I just think he's hard to play, so a lot of people don't end up picking him. I think Jace is extremely strong, especially in the Baron lane, where he can bully a lot of these melee champions with his high range. And of course, if they ever manage to get on top of him, he can still go melee and just knock them away or beat them up melee. I think he's actually one of the most underrated champions, but he is pretty hard to play, so I'm just gonna include him in S tier. I don't think he's as strong as champions like Fiora or the other God tier champions that you will see in a bit. However, he's really, really good. Next up, we have Kayle. Kayle is gonna go into the B tier. So Kayle did receive some preemptive nerfs because of Rageblade, which is a really, really good item on Kayle. The issue with Kayle, again, is that her early game is just unbelievably weak and she's gonna get punished by a lot of champions. However, even though she did get direct nerfs this patch, I think Kayle might have actually overall benefited more than she lost in this patch. The EXP changes benefit her. The turrets becoming stronger highly benefit her, because now a Kayle that's smart can survive a lot more dives than before the patch, which is really, really big for Kayle, because you're mostly hiding under your turret. So as long as you manage the wave correctly and you don't get like frozen on, you actually do have survival chances, and a good Kayle player that understands wave management can survive the lane a lot better. And of course, you also have Rageblade, which is going to be a great, great item on you. So I'm hesitant. I don't want to put her higher than B tier because, of course, Kayle, as we all know, is ass. But this might actually be, since AD Kayle was a thing, this might be the second coming of Kayle. But I guess we'll see how the patch plays forward. I'm hesitant to put her higher than B tier, so we're just gonna keep her here. But these are one of the champions I'm not 100% certain on, and I probably need to do more testing. But I'm predicting Kayle does have potential at least to be even in the A tier. So if you're a Kayle player, this might be your chance. Next up, we have Malphite, who's going straight into A tier. The problem with Malphite is that he is either really OP depending on the matchup or really useless depending on the matchup. If you can get Malphite in some of these bruiser matchups like the Jace, like the Jax, then you're in a really good spot. However, if you pick Malphite and the enemies pick something like a Garen or a Darius or a Mundo, then you're just not in for a good time. They're either going to completely demolish you in lane, take your plates, split push you the whole time, or they're just going to kill you a bunch, right? And you're not going to be able to get to your team fight late game. You're not going to be able to bully them in lane. So Malphite really is one of those champions that it really depends on matchup, and I would mostly use him as a counter pick, especially when the enemies are getting like full AD or a lot of AD in their team. Next up in the Baron lane, we have Kennen, who is one of the most hidden OP champions in my opinion. Obviously in the Baron lane, you do want to make sure you get a good matchup. That's what it's really all about. If you're able to get a good matchup, you're able to get fed, and you can be useful in team fights, then Kennen is an A+. Again, he suffers from the same problem that a lot of AP champions in the Baron lane suffer from. If you have an AP mid laner and then you have like a magic damage dealing support, even like a Leona that does quite a bit of magic damage, or God forbid a Lux support, then you're completely ruining your team comp by picking Kennen. He does struggle in a lot of matchups where the enemies can just get magic resist boots and then you can't one-shot them and they will just jump on you and kill you. But if you can get him on a good matchup and then on a good team comp, Kennen is going to be a really, really good secret OP pick. Who's the next Baron lane champion? Is it Nasus? Hopefully I'm not skipping any. I do think it's Nasus who's going to go into the B tier. Nasa is again one of those champions that's very matchup dependent. If you're able to get your stacks for free in the early game and you can safely get to your first item, I would say, get safely to Trinity Force and Boots, you can just pop your ulti and run anyone down, but it will be matchup dependent. If you can pick into a Malphite, amazing. If you're gonna pick it into, I don't know, a Jace or a Fiora or a Garen, a Gragas, any of these picks, then you're gonna suffer. Renekton, oh dude, I do not want to be playing Nasa against Renekton this patch especially. So again, he's a very situational pick depending on matchup, but he's not too bad. I wonder how Spear of Sojin actually works on Nasus. I wonder if it works with his first ability. I'll need to do more testing on that, but these are kind of the issues on Garen. I've seen a lot of people ask for Nautilus to be put in this, but I'm not going to include Nautilus in the Baron lane. I think it's more of a cheesy pick. I don't think he's really a Baron lane in reality, but if more people request it, maybe I'll start giving my opinion on Nautilus in the Baron lane. Next up, Olaf, who I do consider a Baron laner. He's gonna go to B tier. After his most recent nerfs that he received a few patches ago, he just can't keep up in terms of trading. The early game is supposed to be where Olaf is the strongest, but he kind of goes even in most matchups, and if you're going even on Olaf, you are pretty much falling behind as you get outscaled by most other picks in the Baron lane, so I can't really rationalize putting him any higher than B tier. Pantheon I'm not going to include in my Baron lane tier list since no one really plays Baron lane Pantheon, and we're going to move on to Renekton, who is joining Fiora in the God tier. So Renekton has just received an insane amount of buffs to his Fury, and I think even received a cooldown buff on his third ability. Renekton is just absolutely insane now. You're able to just you're just stomping every lane. Like, he just stomps every lane if you manage his abilities correctly. Sojin is also really good on him. He's one of the best users of Sojin, so he's just gonna be able to completely run through every single laning phase, and if you can play him smart, if you can manage the wave correctly, you can get a huge lead for yourself. And now he's actually a lot better in team fights as well, since you're able to get more empowered abilities, and that means more empowered stuns, more empowered first abilities to get your healing, and more empowered third abilities to shred. So he's definitely gonna be in the God tier this patch. If you're looking for a new Baron laner to play and you like lane bullies, I definitely recommend Renekton. Moving on to Riven, another great Sojin user. Riven was already very strong. The main issue again with Riven is that she's very high skilled and she's really bad at playing from behind. So if you don't fall behind on her, Riven can definitely snowball in 1v9 games. She's going to benefit a lot from the Sojin change as well. I'd say probably more in the jungle than anything, but Riven is going to definitely be one of the best Baron laners as well, especially if you can get her on a good matchup. So definitely going to be an S tier champion this patch. Next up, we have Sett, who I'm reluctantly putting in A tier, even though I do think he has potential to be in S tier as well. I think Sett is actually one of the most underrated champions. I feel like a lot of people play him wrong, and this is one of the reasons why he feels pretty weak, to be honest. But I do think a Bruiser Sett build right now, going with items like Coldbreaker and Sojin, can be pretty good. Heartsteel can also be a good fallback if you're playing against like tanks and you just want to also be a tank. This is a champion that I could put in S tier, honestly, but I'm gonna play it safe and put him in A tier for now. Next up, we have Shen. Shen is one of the most underrated champions in the game. The problem with Shen is, of course, that you are a support at the end of the day. You're a tank support and you need your team to be good. But if your team is good, Shen is unbelievably OP. I can't put him anywhere other than S tier. Obviously, don't play him when you're playing solo, unless you're playing in really high elo and you trust your teammates. But because of how good Shen is as a champion, I just can't not put him in S tier, even though I wouldn't recommend playing him in solo queue. Singed, I think Singed is actually kind of weak right now. The nice thing about Singed is like second ability and third ability are some of the most broken abilities in the game. So if you know what you're doing on him, you can still get massive leads in the mid game by just picking off enemies, right? You just throw your pull on them, you chase them down. If they get off your pull, you fling them back into the pull, you just fling them to your team and you get free kills. It's so hard to play against a good Singed because his second ability makes it so you can't even flash away or get away with your mobility. So he'll just run at you, fling you into his team, and get free kills. Um, and just for that, I can't put him any lower than A tier, but he does struggle a lot when it comes to the laning phase against most Baron laners. There are some proxy sin strategies you can do. However, this champion will be pretty weak in most lanes. But if you can survive lane, you know how to play him, then he can be very, very effective. Next up, I have Sion, who I will finally put in S tier. So there's two reasons why Sion is S tier. Number one, Sion is the best champion to get Galio's Aegis with. You guys have seen me abuse Galio's Aegis on Sion a bunch. All you really need to do is get as many Heartsteel stacks as you can. Never miss a wave, which is really hard to do because even if they do kill you, with your passive, you can just clean up the minions, so you never fall behind, and you can always be in Galio's Aegis range. So just for solo queue reasons, if you're trying to climb with a negative win rate, you can just farm Galio's Aegis on Sion. But another reason is Sion is just really, really underrated if you know how to play him properly. The nice thing about Sion is even if you're in a hard matchup, thanks to his passive and kind of the inting Sion strategy, you will still be useful and you will still be this giant meat shield for your team. I know probably this might get hate. I think a lot of people will probably disagree with me in the comments, but I think Sion is one of the strongest champions if played properly. I think he just becomes insanely tanky and does way too much damage while being tank. If you don't shut him down, he gets ahead of the curve. He's pretty much impossible to shut down. And if you don't have a tank killer in your team, this champion just becomes way too tanky. His second ability gives him an insane shield. Now you can also build Warmogs on him to make him even stronger. So actually, I'm gonna put him S tier. And if people are hating, people are hating. It is what it is. I'm not going against my instincts. I'm putting him S tier. Young Timothy. So you guys know I'm a big Teemo player and I can definitely judge this champion's strength quite accurately. No, you cannot build Rageblade on him. Rageblade is not a good item on Teemo. He did receive a slight nerf with the Liandry's changes. Riftmaker is still okay on him, right? And he mostly does magic damage, so that's not a big issue, but the Liandry's changes do kind of hurt him. It's not a massive nerf, I would say. It's like a small change. It'll help a little more against tanks while being a little weaker against squishies, which is what Teemo loves. Again, the main issue with Teemo is what Kennen also has. You can really pick him in a lot of situations in the Baron lane because your team is going to have a really bad team comp, especially if you have a mid lane mage or a support mage as well. So, especially because Teemo is one of those champions that loves being the only AP on his team. Because if you don't build any magic resist against Teemo, he will absolutely wreck you with his poison and Liandry's and his rooms, right? So Teemo loves being the only AP in the team, but in the Baron lane, that is very rare. And again, he has a lot of really bad matchups. Teemo is actually one of the weaker early game champions, despite having the range advantage. He gets completely destroyed by pretty much every Baron laner. Fiora, Renekton. Fiora might actually be one of his better matchups, to be honest, but it's still bad. Jax, Jace, Riven, all of these good champions absolutely destroy the young Timothy. So yeah, again, you really justify putting him higher than A tier. However, if you do know what you're doing on him, obviously I think I've shown that you can be very, very successful. Next up, another point with Teemo as well. He has all these bad matchups, but if he falls behind, it's completely over. Next up, we have Tryndamere, who we're gonna put in B tier. If you're like a one-trick pony Tryndamere and you can make him work, that's great. But Tryndamere is a hyper-scaling champion with a really bad early game that loses lane to pretty much every Baron laner. So it's really hard for him to scale. And he's not like Kayle, that he's range and he needs to sit back and farm. He has to walk up and be melee. So he's just always in a bad spot. He has a very unique playstyle that if you've mastered, you can be successful on him. But I can't really justify putting him any higher than B tier. Next up is Vayne, who I'm actually going to rate in the Baron lane. I usually don't put her in my tier list, but I think this patch I need to because I think she's actually one of the best Baron laners thanks to Rageblade. So obviously Vayne counters a lot of Baron laners due to her range. The Blade of the Ruined King change is really good on Vayne, so her Blade of the Ruined King into Rageblade into Terminus build is absolutely insane. She again will suffer from the same issues of you don't have a great team comp when we have Vayne top, but this patch especially, Vayne I think is one of the best Baron laners in the game. If you know what you're doing, you can absolutely take over games with Vayne in the Baron lane. She has so many good matchups. She does so much DPS, and of course, Rage Blades works so good on her. That I think it's justified to put her in the Baron lane, especially now with how much stronger turrets are. One of the best things to do against Vayne Baron lane is just dive her, right? You just push a wave with your Baron laner, and then you just dive her with your jungler. If she's the one pushing up, you just gank her, right? And that's kind of how you win the game. But with the turret changes, Vayne will become even stronger. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put her in S tier in the Baron lane tier list. Next up, we have Wukong, who has both his damage build and his tank build. I'm gonna put him in A tier, even though he does have potential to be in S tier. The main reason why he's not in S tier is that he does kind of fall off. If you build him tank, he's just not as useful as other tanks like Sion and like Shan. He's probably not even as useful as like Mundo or Garen. His ult is nice, right? You get some knockup, you get some CC, but his damage is very lackluster as compared to other tanks. And if you build him Bruiser, he's just not as good of a Bruiser as champions like Renekton, Jax, Riven, and so on, right? So even though he does have two good builds, neither of them really excel. So I don't think I can really justify putting him in S tier. Next up, we have Yasuo, who I think Yasuo is one of the most underrated champions in general. I think he's really, really OP. But in the Baron lane, he suffers from just having terrible matchups, right? He gets completely destroyed by pretty much every God tier and S tier champion. Like, imagine playing Yasuo into Renekton or a Fiora this patch, or Riven, or Jace, or Jax. He just doesn't have any good matchups. But if you can get him in a good matchup, which again, it's rare, your best chances are probably like a Kennen, a Teemo, an Aurelia maybe. I guess that's it. He doesn't have like a lot of really good matchups, but if you do get him in a good matchup, he can definitely pop off, especially with how good his late game is. So I'm gonna go ahead and put him in A tier. Moving on to Yone, who is very similar to Yasuo, and I kind of have like the same feedback. I think Yone is actually a little better in the Baron lane than Yasuo is. I think he has a few matchups that are a little easier. His second ability kind of also allows him to be a little better against bruisers and tanks that stack HP, doing the max health damage in the early to mid game. I think it's a little safer, while Yasuo kind of needs to go in with his dashes. Yone can always come back with his third ability, so I think he's a little better in terms of the Baron lane, but I can't really justify putting him anywhere higher than A tier. I'm not going to include Warwick in the Baron lane. I don't think people really play him in the Baron lane anymore. And next up, we're going to have Aatrox, who I'm going to put in the God tier. Aatrox was already one of the best Baron laners in the game, and now he's just simply even better with Spear of Sojin. Of course, Aatrox highly relies on his first ability, so being able to do more damage on it and having a lower cooldown is really, really nice. He's actually one of the champions that has a decent matchup into a lot of the other Baron lanes as well. Probably not Fiora or Renekton, but he'll do great into some of the other picks, especially the ranged champions like Vayne. So I'm going to put her... Actually, what am I saying? Aatrox has a terrible matchup into Vayne. He has a good matchup into other ranged champions like Kennen and Teemo, but definitely not Vayne. Next up, we have Urgot. And Urgot's a champion that is decent, right? He's very good in the early game, and he's one of the best Heartsteel stackers. So if you can get him in a good matchup, he'll be good. But he's nowhere near the S tier champions. However, he's not bad enough to really put B tier. So he's kind of mad. If you enjoy playing Urgot, I think it'd be a great pick to climb with, especially in lower elos. But he's gonna struggle against champions like the Fiora and some of the better champions when it comes to scaling. Even though you can kind of bully them in the early game, he's super easy to deal with in the later parts of the game. Next up, we have Ornn, who's probably the best tank in the game. I think he's like okay with the new items. I wouldn't recommend building them on him. He's probably still better off going Sunfire, maybe Heartsteel if you're in an easy matchup, and Thornmail. But he's one of the best tanks in the game. He has one of the best engaged in the game. He's just insanely tanky, and of course, being able to give, especially your jungler, the passive where you can buy items out of lane can be very impactful. So Ornn is gonna be in S tier until pretty much further notice, until he gets nerfed. So we can move on to Volibear, who's going to go into the A tier. I think Volibear is kind of meh, to be honest. He just doesn't have a lot of good matchups. And again, most of the A tier champions kind of have the same thing. Like, they can be good, right? They have decent stats, but they're not overwhelmingly strong like the S tier or God tier champions. And usually they will kind of like not be great for most situations. Volibear is the exception. He's usually decent and he's gonna go well with Garen. The turret changes actually don't really matter to him since he negates the turrets anyway. So he'll continue being one of the best diving champions and one of the best champions to bully weak early game champions and one of the best champions when he's ahead. But he's just not strong enough in the mid to late game to warrant putting him anywhere higher. I'm not going to include Vladimir in the Baron lane tier list since he's not really a Baron laner. We're going to include Maokai though. I think Maokai actually has some potential in the Baron lane. The problem is picking him in terms of matchups. You don't really have good matchups. Your best case situation is picking him into another tank and just being a better initiator and better CC bot. I think that's okay into some bruiser matchups. I think the turret changes do benefit him a little bit since he's obviously one of the champions that you can never dive because of how much CC he has. The main issue he has in the Baron lane is mana pool issues. You can mitigate that kind of with mana flow band. I do think he's a little underrated in the Baron lane, so I felt like I should include him in A tier. If you guys want to play some Maokai, even though I think he's probably better off in the support role. Next up we have Mordekaiser. So this is one of the most, I would say, kind of controversial picks of the patch because he did receive what many are calling a buff, what many are calling a nerf, and that is the changes to Riftmaker. But he also received an item that looks to be really good on him, and that is the Psychic Projector. Overall, I think it's a very similar story to Gwen, that this is not really a buff, it's probably a slight nerf for Mordekaiser, who deals mostly magic damage, but he still deals some damage with some physical damage with his auto attacks. So I'd say it's maybe like a slight buff in the late game, but you have to keep in mind that all the other champions have received bigger buffs than him. Like the champion he's competing against, right? He received the buff in like a 3 to 4th items, but how is he gonna lane against a Vayne who with Rage Blade? How is he gonna lane against a Fiora now? How is he gonna lane against Renekton or Aatrox or Spear of Sojin in the as second or third items until you get to that 4th item where you can build Psychic Projector? This is a champion that you can put in S tier. I wouldn't be mad someone putting Mordekaiser in S tier. However, I think he's just right below that. If there was a tier in between, I would put him there. I just don't think he's as strong as people make him out to be, so I'm gonna put him in A tier, but I'd be okay with somebody putting him in S tier. I wouldn't be too mad at that. Next up, we have Ambessa, who's gonna go straight into S tier. Ambessa kind of received a pretty big buff. Spear of Sojin is just a core item on her. Going Eclipse, Spear of Sojin, into something like Death Dance is just unbelievably broken on a champion like Ambessa. You know what? I'm kind of changing my mind about Mordekaiser. I kind of want to put him in S tier. Oh, what do we think? I think it's more fitting to put him in S tier. I think it's more fitting. I'm gonna put Mordekaiser in S tier. I think it's more fitting. That's like pretty much for all the reasons I mentioned before. He does have some bad matchups and some champions did get buffed overall, but I still think he's probably an S tier champion. I think one of the other reasons I didn't really mention that I think he probably benefited is the Maw of Malmortius changes. You can't really go Maw of Malmortius against him anymore. I'm just gonna put him in S tier. I think it's more fitting, but he's probably one of the weaker S tier champions, if not the weakest. So, Ambessa with Spear of Sojin will definitely be in S tier. She's just really, really strong in these 1v1 side lane situations. She can get really fed, and her ulti gives her a lot of roaming potential to impact the map later on. And she's also a beast in team fights, where most bruisers kind of struggle to access that backline. You can just find a good ultimate, especially on immobile carries, who are kind of becoming the meta. Like champions like Varus, Kog'Maw, you can easily get on top of with your ult and just completely destroy. So I'm gonna go ahead and put her in S tier. Next up, we have Rumble, who's also gonna comfortably sit in S tier. Even though Rumble's AP build, I guess it didn't really get nerfed since he pretty much only deals magic damage, so Riftmaker's probably still fine on him. Rumble has a really good tank build, and I'm kind of wondering how good he will be with Psychic Projector on that tank build. Going Sunfire Cape into tank on Rumble is devastating, so I'm wondering if some Sunfire Cape, Psychic Projector builds make this champion unbelievably OP. They probably do. So I'm definitely putting Rumble in S tier just because of how broken his stats are, how broken he is as kind of this like bruiser with grasp. So I'm not 100% sure on his AP build, but I do know that his tank build is really, really strong, so I'm gonna go ahead and put him in S tier. Next up, Gnar is also gonna be going to S tier. Gnar is just really, really strong because of his Mega Gnar form being just the most broken champion in the game. Obviously, you can't always be Mega Gnar, but even in Mini Gnar, he's able to constantly threaten with his range and get Mega Gnar quickly. He pretty much has like a 15-second window where he can turn Mega after he's already become Mega, and that's the only time where he's useless. Other than that 15 seconds, he's really, really strong. He's great in the side lane, great split pusher, great team fighter. Not a great Spear of Sojin user, I don't think, but he's definitely going to continue being S tier with his Trinity Force Black Cleaver into tank build. Thornmail is not even going to work better on him since he can use it a lot better as a mini Gnar now that Thornmail works on the damage you deal as well. So definitely an S tier champion. So Ryze would probably be, I guess we're doing Poppy, wait, let me swap them. Ryze would be S tier, but I'm not going to put him in the tier list since no one really plays Ryze in the Baron lane, which is a shame because he's really strong. Next up, we're going to do Poppy, who I think is probably a little overrated. I think her laning phase is really, really strong, but other than that, she struggles. If you don't have a good matchup for her, then she just kind of does nothing, right? You can completely ignore her and just outscale her. She struggles against most tanks that just simply outscale her and are more useful in the late game. And it's not like a good bruiser matchup, like the Riven, for example, that you can just shut down. And then she's just not useful. Even against a Fiora, that should be a good matchup for Poppy, you just get completely outscaled. So survive the laning phase and you're gonna always outscale Poppy, who, sure, she'll be a useful tank in the late game, but she's kind of in a similar spot with Garen, right? She's just really good in the early game. You can go this tank build on her to kind of stay relevant later on, but you're just not gonna be doing much anyway. Is that it for the Baron lane? Yeah, I guess that will be it for the Baron lane. We're not going to include Smolder in the Baron lane tier list. So these are my thoughts in the Baron lane. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree. And then we can hop straight into the jungle. Moving on to the jungle, a lot of the already good junglers actually became a lot stronger. So starting off with Amumu, who did receive some pretty decent buffs in the form of Abyssal Mask. Amumu didn't really have a great magic resist item before, so now he actually has a really good magic resist item choice. So he's gonna be straight into S tier, even potentially God tier, but I'm not gonna put him in God tier just yet. He's wave clear, not wave clear, his farming is really good, his ganks are really good, his team fighting is really good, he's a great option as a tank. Definitely a solid S tier champion, potential for God tier as well. Next up we have Camille, who's going straight into B tier. While her ganks are pretty good, especially with her ultimate, her farming does struggle, so I don't really think I can put her higher than B tier. I wonder if Spear of Sojin actually makes her a little better in the jungle, but I don't think so. I think especially now with how many good how strong the S tier and God tier champions are gonna be, she will just kind of be left behind. Darius, his clear speed is pretty slow. He's very low mobility, so his ganks are not great, and he gets absolutely destroyed by most of the meta junglers, so I can't really put him any higher than B tier. Same thing with Mundo. While he does scale well into the late game, his early game is awful, his ganks are not great, and he doesn't even clear that fast, so I can't really warrant putting him any higher. Diana, the problem with Diana is that other AP junglers are just better. Even Amumu is better. The problem with Diana is once she's strong, she's really strong. But once she's weak, she's really weak because it's really hard for Diana to do much since she can only go in, right? So if going in and killing the enemy doesn't work, she's kind of useless. So really bad from behind. And right now, her stats are just not that high. So she just struggles against other better choices, I guess, right? Evelynn straight into S tier. Evelyn's one of the best junglers in the game. If you gave in a slight lead, she completely takes over games. Her damage is unreal high, and she can be very, very oppressive when played correctly. Next up we have Echo, who is he's still a good choice, I would say, for a jungler. But the problem with Echo is that his early game is too weak. His early game script machine is really weak, so he does need to kind of scale and get to that late game power spike. But I can't really justify putting him in S tier in this meta. Gragas is a solid A tier champ. He clears the jungle surprisingly well. He scales very well. His ganks can be very oppressive, especially with his third ability, Flash. I just think that there's better choices for the jungle right now. I think even for AP champions, you're probably better off going for Evelynn. He's not weak by any means, but he does kind of struggle, especially if he falls behind. Next up, we have Fizz, who I love Fizz, but unfortunately the champion is pretty piss useless. There's no reason to really pick him over champions like Evelynn or Echo or even Gragas. The problem with Fizz is that his third ability has such a long cooldown that after you use it, you're just kind of a sitting duck for the rest of the fight. Even in League PC, his cooldown, his third ability cooldown is actually shorter than Wild Rift, which is kind of insane since Wild Rift is the faster paced game. So until that gets buffed, Fizz unfortunately will be pretty weak. Next up we have Graves, who he's a decent champion because he can clear the jungle relatively fast and kind of get himself ahead through farming. If he can like find fights when he has his third ability stacks, you will be really good on those fights. But his mid game kind of struggles. He's very easy to focus down because he's squishy and he's like fake ranged because he's not really very high ranged. He does scale like a monster, but it's really hard to get to those spikes, and he gets pretty easily countered by Randuin's, especially if you have another crit champion elsewhere, most likely your ADC. Gwen is going to go straight into S tier. Gwen is incredibly powerful when she can free scale, which she can kind of do in the jungle. Her ganks are all right with her third ability. You just kind of run at the enemies and chase them down with her third ability and ultimate, slowing them down. But obviously, you kind of want to just power farm and then hyper carry in the late game, which a lot of these champions can do. Jarvan, straight into S tier, one of the best gankers in the game. His third ability is absurdly OP, by the way. It gives an insane amount of attack speed to your whole team and can really turn around team fights. Especially since he has a very low cooldown, you can like constantly have it up. His ultimate is one of the best teamfight spells in the game. Very solid choice, very tanky, deals a good amount of damage, scales decently well into the late game, and like these bruiser junglers like the Vi, the Wukong, and the Zhao, the Jarvan that are just pretty tanky while being really good at ganking and really good in team fights are always going to be really good until further notice, until they receive some kind of nerf. Jack's clear speed is just too slow because his passive does not work on camps. Once you can get to your Trinity Force, you can be useful, especially with Sojin, but his early game is really, really weak, and I don't think that the payoff in the later game is worth compared to other champions that do have weak early games but can be absolute monsters in the late game. Next we have Jace, who is decent. His clear speed is okay, and if he can kind of get to one or two items, his damage is insane, but other AD assassin type junglers, I guess, are just better than Jace right now. So I can't really justify putting him any higher, but he is a decent champion if you want to play Jace in the jungle. I do recommend playing him mid or Baron. I think he's a little stronger on those roles. Next up, we have Kha'Zix, who I have seen some like Adam is the GOAT of bruiser Kha'Zix, and he insists that it's really OP with Sojin. I haven't really tried it, but I haven't seen it be that successful. I think I tried it in one game and it just didn't really go great. I just don't think Kha'Zix is that strong right now. His assassin build is meh. I think you're better off playing other AD assassins like Talon, like Rengar, like Zed. He's not a terrible champion by any means, and his bruiser build can work. He can be pretty decent with Sojin. I just think there's better options right now, like again, the Zed, the Rengar, the Viego, those types of champions, the Lee Sin, right? Speaking of Lee Sin, we're gonna throw him straight into S tier. He did receive some small buffs on his energy recovery this patch, but Lee Sin already has really good energy recovery with his passive. He doesn't really ever run out of energy, so it's not going to be too impactful. Then previous nerfs that they did his ultimate first ability is the only reason he's not God tier, because he can't really one-shot you while being even. He kind of has to be ahead now. Still a really good choice, one of the best gankers in the game, great duelist, and he doesn't really fall off in the late game. That's a bit of a myth. If you do know how to use his ultimate, he can be very, very useful in the late game as well. I didn't include Kayle in the jungle tier list, as I do not really think she is a jungler. So we're gonna move on to Master Yi, and this is where it becomes kind of controversial, because where do you put Master Yi, man? So Master Yi did receive a direct nerf, but he also received a giant indirect buff in the form of Rage Blade. Out of any champions in the game, Master Yi is probably the best user of Rage Blade. First of all, he stacks it extremely fast, which other champions don't really do. Like Vayne, Kog'Maw, and Varus don't really stack it really fast. Master Yi, because of his auto attack resets, he has 2 by the way on his third ability and second ability, can stack up immediately. And it works great not just with his third ability, but with his first ability, with his passive and his first ability. You can get your first ability up more often. Your passive, you can proc it more times, so you can get an extra auto attack. And of course the true damage on your third ability. He also received a small indirect buff with Blade of the Ruined King changes, since now he does Omnivamp, which is great on Yi, because he deals magic damage from Rage Blade and true damage from his passive. So you just go Blade of the Ruined King, Rage Blade, Terminus, and you're just unbelievably strong. I've debated very hard on if I should put him in S tier or God tier, but I do think he's barely a God tier champion. I don't think he's the strongest champion in the jungle or in the current meta, or like the strongest champion overall. But I think he's very, very strong if you know how to play him. A lot of people think that he's easy to play over noob champ, which is definitely not true. Being able to correctly use his second ability during fights to block damage, being able to use his first ability correctly to dodge certain key spells, and of course getting the auto resets on both his third and his second ability quickly can be somewhat challenging. Obviously there's no champion of Wild Rift other than maybe Yasuo or Aurelia that are insanely hard mechanically, but Master Yi is one of the harder mechanical champions, so I don't know why people call him a noob champ, but I will put him in God tier for this patch. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe he's more deserving of S tier, but playing him just feels insane. This champion feels so brutally strong. If you haven't seen my Master Yi videos on my channel, check those out and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. I have one in the newest patch abusing Rage Blade. And on my second channel, which shout out to Royal Wild Rift Gameplays, that's my second channel where you can catch some of my best gameplays. That sometimes I post, most of the time it's just the best games of my stream, but sometimes I'll post some new gameplays you guys have never seen. So definitely check out that channel. I have another Master Yi game there that you can check out. Next up, I have Nasus, who's gonna go straight into. I'll just put these two in D tier. I'll just put him here to disincentivize people from picking them, to be honest. Next up, I have Morgana, who I think received a slight buff. I think her ulti changes are a slight buff, especially in the jungle. It's gonna allow you to kind of be more useful in terms of killing squishies, which junglers need to be able to do. One of the big issues that Morgana has is she couldn't really even 1v1 ADC in the side lane, and you kind of need to be able to do that as a jungler to snowball. She's still not gonna be S tier though. I feel like it's harder to double camp on this map, so I'm not sure how her double camping looks like now. And her second ability, nerf that she received a while ago, has just made her jungle tier a little slower, which was the main reason to pick Morgana in the first place. So I can't really put her any higher than A tier. Nautilus, we're gonna put in S tier. So I think the Nautilus build where he goes like off tank with the Rod of Ages and then Psychic Projector is gonna be really, really powerful in the jungle. I think his full AP build is not as good. I think his AP tanky build is really, really good, and that's why I recommend you guys run. And I think that build is actually just gonna be S tier. I'm probably gonna end up making a video on it because I haven't seen too many people spam it, but pretty much you go Rod of Ages and then you go into tanky AP. So you're gonna go Rod of Ages and then you can go either like Warmogs, Frozen Heart, Iceborne Gauntlet. It just kind of depends on what the situation calls for. So you go Rod of Ages and that, and then Psychic Projector and Twin Guard, and you're just insanely tanky. I'm probably gonna end up making a video on it because I haven't seen this build too much, even though I think it's really OP. Nunu straight into S tier. Nunu is one of the best tanks in the game. His passive is one of the most underrated abilities in the game. He has really good engage. His first ability allows him to always have a fast jungle clear and be able to easily secure objectives, right? It's never 50-50 when you have a Nunu in your team. His ultimate is really good in team fights. His stats are really good. He does a lot of damage for a tank. Super underrated champion, definitely deserving of S tier. Next up, I have Olaf, who we're going to put in A tier, but even A tier I'm a little hesitant to put him on. He's pretty weak. The problem with Olaf is that he's very, very useless from behind, because all he can do is run at you, and if you're stronger than him, you just kill him. But even if he's really not that strong, so he kind of needs to get a lead, and his early game is not that strong where he can reliably get a lead. But we're gonna put him in A tier because he's a good counter to a lot of immobile carries. Next up, we're gonna go for Pantheon, who will also be in A tier. He has really, really strong ganks with his second ability, but more important than that, he has really good counter ganks with his ultimate. He doesn't really benefit or lose out in this patch, so he's gonna remain a strong A tier champion. Next up, we have Rengar, who again doesn't really benefit from this patch. You're never building like Rageblade or Sojin on him. Maybe you got like a slight change because of the Duskblade changes. But Rengar is pretty much this champion that if you know what you're doing on him, he's insanely strong. If you don't know what you're doing on him, you shouldn't even play him, right? Doing his combos properly and utilizing stacks is actually pretty hard. So if you're a one-trick Rengar, you're gonna have a lot of success on this champion. If you're first timing him, you're gonna suck. Next up, we have Rammus, who's gonna go straight into the S tier. If the enemy team has 5 AD champions, you instantly win the game. If the enemy team has 4 AD champions, you're very likely to win the game. Rammus is one of the best anti-AD counters. He has really strong ganks, very easy to hit, reliable crowd control. He's super tanky and he's really strong even in team fights. The main weakness of Rammus is the enemy team having like good AP tank killer like a Gwen and just one-shotting him, or being able to team fight properly and kite him out. And when his second ability expires, he's obviously very vulnerable. But he's one of the best champions in the game right now. Next up, we have Riven, who will be joining the God tier. So Riven was already one of the strongest S tier champions in my opinion, but the addition of Sojin just gives her more build options, makes her really tanky in the early game. You just go Trinity, Sojin, Death Dance, and the champion doesn't die. She has so much mobility while being super tanky and dealing an insane amount of damage. Her resets are of course absolutely crazy. This champion was already on the verge of being God tier, but with the addition of Sojin, she's gonna be absolutely insane. If you guys have not seen my review of the rank 1 Riven player KKM, definitely check that out on my channel. And if you guys want me to do a new one for this, for the newest patch, let me know down below. And maybe we can make another Riven video. So yeah, definitely God tier champion. Next up, we have Shen, who's going straight into S tier. Shen is really good because of his ultimate counter ganks. When you're in the jungle, you don't even really sacrifice anything since the enemy can't take plates or turrets while you're gone from Baron lane. So he has one of the best counter ganks in the game while clearing the jungle relatively fast and scaling relatively well for a tank jungler. I think his ultimate just creates an impossible situation for enemy junglers where they can't really ever gank and you're the only one who can gank, and if they ever gank, you just counter gank with your ultimate and you just win the 2v2 or the 3v3, because the enemies, they use all the spells on your shield, you spawn, you save your teammate, and then you clean up or whatever is left. Next up, we have Shyvana, who's one of the strongest champions this patch. I actually debated putting her in God tier, but I think she's not as strong as some of these God tier champions, but she's definitely right there. Right there, ready to be God tier. The Blade of the Ruined King changes have added another potential item to her item pool, since she does obviously a lot of mixed damage, so now Blade of the Ruined King can also be built. You can go Trinity, Blade of the Ruined King, and then Death Dance, or just go Trinity into Death Dance. That is fine as well. Shyvana has obviously been pretty good for a while now. So I think she's on the verge of being God tier, but I'm just going to keep her in S tier for now. I've seen some AP Shyvana builds too, but I don't know how much I trust that yet. That'll need to be worked on a little more. Tryndamere straight into D tier, really weak early game, doesn't even scale that well, can't really gank. His clear speed is also kind of like meh. Next up, we have Vi straight into S tier, of course. Similar to Jarvan, right? She's pretty tanky, she has really good ganks and clears the jungle relatively well. With Vi, you just clear the jungle, ult someone, clear the jungle, ult someone. Her ulti cooldown is really, really low. And so she has an insane early game impact. And of course, in team fights, you can always ult a priority target. And if your team is able to collapse on them, you just get a free dub. So really, really good champion. Wukong, similar to these type of like bruiserist junglers that I think are really good. You're very tanky, you have really good team fights. I think you can be a lot more impactful than you can in the Baron lane because you're not stuck kind of in the 1v1. Now, Wukong is okay in the 1v1, but he doesn't really shine in 1v1s. He shines in these like 2v2s, 3v3s where he can get big ultimates, kind of create chaos with his clone, jump all over the place, and, you know, be a monkey, right? That's what Wukong is best at. So definitely a S tier jungler. You got this like bruiser build with Trinity Force and Sunder in the Sky, and you just deal insane damage with your first ability. So definitely an S tier champion. Next up, we have Xin Zhao, who will also be joining the S tier. Again, this type of bruiser jungler has really good early game. He wins pretty much every 1v1, 2v2, 3v3 in the early game. His ulti is a great disruptor later in the game, negating a lot of damage and making him pretty fake tanky. He doesn't scale very well, but you should be able to snowball in the early game. And if you do snowball with him, you can just jump on anyone, one shot them when you're ahead, right? So definitely an S tier jungler as well. Next up, we have Zed, who's going to be joining us in the God tier. I think Zed is probably the best champion in... maybe I spoke too soon. We do have Smolder, but Zed is the second best champion in the game right now. I just can't believe they buffed him again, bro. I can't believe... Dude, when I read the patch notes, I'm like, what is going on, dude? I swear that, like, the lead of the balance team, like, their son, 100% mains Zed, and for Christmas, he's like... Daddy, can you please buff Zed? And they're like, oh, I guess we have to buff Zed. And then he, like a week ago, was probably his birthday, and he's like, I want more Zed buffs, Dad. And his dad obliges and just keeps buffing Zed over and over again. There's just no other explanation. I have no idea why they keep buffing Zed. He's like somewhat hard to play if you don't know what you're doing. He's one of those champions that if you get like 100 games on him, then you're pretty in a good spot. But like for first timers, you're gonna be completely lost on Zed, right? Once you do learn him, I don't think he's like that difficult. He's not like a Yasuo or like an Irelia, where they have like insanely high mechanical skill ceiling. But if you don't know what you're doing, you're not gonna be successful whatsoever. And I think that's probably why they keep buffing him. He's probably struggling like low reloads or with players that are bad. But put him on my hands, put him on Corrupt's hands, and this champion is just absolutely insane. I mean, I have like a 90% win rate on him. I'm winning every single game I play on him, especially in the jungle where it's super easy to get fed on him. If you guys want to see exactly how to stomp games with Zed, I have a video on my channel. I think on my second channel, I also have like a Sojin video showing how to use Sojin on him. But yeah, definitely God tier champion. Check out my Zed vids if you want to learn how to play him. I think he's one of my better champions. Next up, we have, the thing is, Yone isn't really a jungler, so I don't really want to include him. I'm gonna put him in A tier because after the first couple clears, this champion just snowballs off control in the jungle because of how fed he can get super quickly. As long as you're maintaining 900 gold per minute, you're a monster, but his early game is absolutely horrendous. So I can't really put him higher than A tier, so I'll just put him A tier for now. Warwick, I'm actually going to put in S tier. I haven't really seen Rageblade Warwick yet, so I don't know how strong he is with Rageblade. But even without Rageblade, I actually think Warwick has been like kind of an underrated champion. I think he's one of the best low elo stompers and noob stompers, and if you get a lead on him, you can just run around with your ulti and one-shot anyone. He clears jungle pretty fast. I'm a bit of a Warwick hater because I think he's completely useless in team fights and later into the game, but I'm gonna go ahead and put him S tier in this tier list, even though I usually have him lower, even though he hasn't really received any major buffs or nerfs. I think Blade of the Ruined King is super interesting on him because he does a lot of magic damage, and now that will become Omnivamp, but he already heals a crazy amount. But I do think he's an S tier champion. I'm a little iffy on this because I haven't tested him or seen him too much. this patch, but I do think he's probably an S tier champion. Next up, we have Kayn, who is also an S tier champion, and this is mostly for Red Kayn. I have a Red Kayn video on my second channel, I believe. If not, it's going to be uploaded very soon, where you can really see the strength of Red Kayn with Sojourn. I think Blue Kayn is still going to be a little behind the champions like the Rengar, the Lee Sin, the Zed, especially the Zed, because they're very similar. But I think Red Kayn is definitely an S tier champion, so if the enemies are quite tanky, Red Kayn is a great choice. Next up, we have Aatrox, who will also be joining us in the God tier. We're going to have quite a few God tier champions this patch in the jungle. A lot of champions are really strong in the jungle. So Aatrox does benefit a lot from Sojourn. He was already one of the best jungler. He's actually the best jungler in super high elo in China, and in competitive play, Aatrox is actually considered to be the best jungler in the game. His early game is kind of meh because his clear speed isn't great, but he's just insanely strong in these early game skirmishes with his ult, these 2v2, 3v3s, his AoE knockups and his healing and his ultimate are just so oppressive that he's able to easily get those early game leads, and then in the late game he just completely takes over with even like the slightest of leads. And Sojourn is just another optional item that he can get. He can go Trinity Force into Death's Dance versus harder matchups, or he can go Trinity Force, Sojourn, Death's Dance, and then Cheryl and he's just gonna be absolutely insanely strong. So we're gonna put him in the God tier. Next up, Lilia is gonna go into S tier. I really want to see a little more Psychic Projector Lilia. She's not complete. She's like she maybe got a small nerf with Riftmaker, because obviously she does true damage with her first ability, so Riftmaker is a slight nerf towards her, and I guess Liandry's is also a small nerf on her, so her early game will probably be a little weaker, but she does have the option of going 4th item, Psychic Projector, which again, very similar to Gwen. It's not really a big buff because it's so late in the game, but that could be a very solid option for Lilia, especially if you need magic damage, and especially if you're playing against tanky teams. Definitely can warrant putting her out tier, but she's very far off from an A tier champion. Definitely a solid S tier. Next up we have let's put Twitch in the D tier, so to disincentivize people from playing Twitch. Okay, so next up we have Volibear, who's gonna go in the B tier. The problem with Volibear is that yes, his early game is good, right? But why would I ever pick Volibear instead of something like Jarvan, something like Vi, something like Wukong, right? He doesn't scale well. He needs to be super far ahead to really be useful, and I think he's just not very good at anything pretty much. His ganks are weak. The only thing he's really good at is diving, but especially now with the turret changes, I don't know if obviously that doesn't change much for Volibear because it completely disables the turret, but if the enemies can survive a little longer and the turret starts like hitting you, it's a disaster. I've had him I think in A tier in previous tier lists, but I just don't really believe on Volibear. Next up we have Hecarim, who's joining the God tier. We have 5, I think we have 6 God tier champions this tier list. So yeah, I mean, Hecarim is just OP with Sojourn. He was already one of the strongest junglers in terms of AFK farming and then being insane, kind of like Master Yi and Shyvana. But now with Spear of Sojourn, which is not just a core item, it's a must build on him, he's gonna be absolutely insane. That Trinity Force, Spear of Sojourn, Death's Dance combo is gonna be crazy for so many champions, making them insanely tanky while dealing insane amount of self damage. With Hecarim, you can even go greedy build and go for Mana Immune, and then you kind of like skip Death's Dance to kind of go more damage. So you go like Trinity Force, Mana Immune, Spear of Sojourn, just completely take over games. I have a Hecarim video uploaded. I think it was yesterday. So definitely check that out. I absolutely popped off on that video. So if you want to see how to play Hecarim, that's a great video to watch. So yeah, definitely God tier champion this game. Or this patch. Fiddlesticks, we're gonna put in A tier. I just don't think he can keep up in the current meta. I think the junglers that he's against are just not really dying to use ultimate, right? A lot of them do go Quicksilver, like the Riven, the Aatrox, the Hecarim. I don't think he has good matchups against any of these like God tier picks. So he's very vulnerable in general. If you do know how to play Fiddlesticks and you can find these surprise ults, you can definitely be useful. But a lot of the time when I judge these S tier champions, I look at their matchups against the God tier champions or the better S tier champions, and Fiddlesticks just doesn't really have good matchups here. So I can't really put him any higher than A tier, even though I'm kind of a Fiddlesticks believer. Next up, I'm not sure if Zyra is honestly any good in the jungle. Should I include her in the jungle tier list? I don't know where I would rate her, so I'd feel bad putting her in because I genuinely have no clue where she belongs. Talon, we're gonna put in S tier. I think Talon is one of the better junglers if you know what you're doing. He's super high tempo with his third ability, so you can like quickly farm them up and get super far ahead in gold. And then once you do get far away in gold, if you do know how to use his combos properly, he can deal a lot of damage. So definitely a champion that you need to know what you're doing with, very similar to Rengar. But if you do know what you're doing with, you can be very, very deadly on him. Viego straight into S tier, one of the stronger S tier champions, very debatable. I wouldn't mind if anybody put him in God tier, to be honest. The nice thing about Viego is that once he's ahead, the game is just so hard to play because of his resets, right? He one-shot someone, gets a reset, one-shot someone, gets a reset, and so on and so forth. And he also has a really strong early game, which makes snowballing relatively easy because, again, really good late game or really good early game. So definitely an S tier champion. Could make an argument for God tier as well. Kindred straight into S tier as well. The main problem with Kindred is, again, team comps. You're playing a ranged marksman, so most of the time you're going to have at least 2 ranged marksmen in your team with your ADC, so your team comp will often suffer if you don't have a strong front line. However, if your team does pick some front line, Kindred can be one of the best junglers if you're really good at jungle. If you understand how to play around his marks, if you understand how to properly invade, if you understand how to properly get yourself ahead with Kindred, and how to play these early fights, Kindred can be insane. The problem with Kindred is you don't want to let any of these champions get on top of you, right? You have a short cooldown dash, you have a slow on your third ability, you have smite. You need to make sure that you're creating the space you need and kiting out a lot of these champions. So he's kind of hard to play in terms of knowing how to play him, not necessarily mechanically. But if you do know what you're doing, Kindred is really, really strong. I guess Maokai can jungle. I'm probably not going to include him in the jungle tier list. I don't really see Maokai jungle anymore. Mordekaiser can jungle, but you shouldn't pick him in the jungle. And Bessa is going to be S tier. I think she's better off in the Baron lane right now, but she's still a great jungler. She's just not going to be as good as the Aatrox and Riven, who kind of do the same thing as her in the jungle. Her clear speed is a little slower than these champions. She's not as great in the 2v2s and 3v3s as the Riven and the Aatrox, because she doesn't really get resets, right? But she's still a really good option. She's going to be one of the best fighter junglers. So if you like Ambessa and you want to play her in the jungle, definitely go for it. Poppy is going to go into the A tier. Poppy is actually fairly good jungler in the early game. She just kind of falls off it as a scale as well. But if you are confident in your early game and you can snowball really quickly, Poppy can be a decent pick. She's really good in these 2v2s and 3v3s, even against champions like Riven and Aatrox who rely on dashes, right? You can just stun them up, lock them up, and one-shot them with your team. But she does get outscaled pretty hard by pretty much everyone. Nocturne is going to go in the A tier. The problem with Nocturne as an AD assassin is that he can't one-shot, he can't do 1v1 any of the like meta junglers, right? He can't really 1v1 even champions like Jarvan, Wukong, Vi, so he's kind of forced to like keep going for the ADC or the mid laner of the enemy team. And if you can't one-shot those because they have stasis, then the champion just kind of becomes useless. They've nerfed him quite hard. He's still decent if you know what you're doing, and he can get very far ahead, and he can do a lot of one-shots, but he's slowly gonna get forgotten if they don't buff him. Next up, we have our last God tier jungler, and that's Nidalee. Nothing has changed for Nidalee. She was God tier before, she's still a God tier. The champion is really OP. I recently played an insane Nidalee game on stream. It's probably gonna go up on my second channel, so look out for that. Nidalee is just absolutely crazy as a champion. She's just too tanky, her heal is too broken, her poke is too good, her damage is too good. The champion is just out of this world insane, and unless she gets nerfed, she's gonna continue being God tier for the foreseeable future. And I think that might be it for the junglers. I don't think I've forgotten anyone. I'm just quickly checking to make sure. But I think that is all the junglers. So let me know what you guys think about my jungle tier list below, and now we can move on to mid. Okay, let's move on to the mid lane, and here's where I was probably somewhat wrong on the wind tunnel thingies. I thought that they would be way more impactful than they actually are. They're pretty much negligible, so I thought roaming would kind of be back. We're so back with roaming, but it doesn't really seem to be the case. It seems like roaming might have actually been nerfed because of the turret changes, since diving is a lot harder. So I guess I was slightly wrong on that. The wind tunnels actually make a big difference. So not much has changed in the mid lane, so my tier list will look somewhat similar. Ahri will continue to be the best mid laner in my opinion. She just does it all. Her wave clear is great, her roaming is good, her trades are amazing, she snowballs amazing. So she'll continue to be great. Akali, definitely an S tier. Akali is actually one of the biggest, I guess, benefactors from the energy changes. He's a champion that runs out of energy quite quickly, especially in the early game. So being able to just kind of get her energy back really quickly is going to be absolutely massive for her. So definitely a decent upgrade on Kali. Annie, one of the most underrated champions in my opinion. She continues to be an S tier champion. Her burst is really, really high. She has a very strong laning phase and one of the best teamfight initiators with her flash Tibbers as well. Can definitely be a difference maker. Aurelion Sol. Oh, I guess I've skipped Akshan, huh? Akshan is going to go in the A tier. Akshan is one of the best one-trick champions in my opinion, but he's very unique in the way that he plays. He has a very, very oppressive early game and he can snowball off control, but if he falls behind, he's completely useless. So we can't really warrant putting him any higher. Aurelion Sol, S tier. He has one of the best wave clears in the game. The turret changes really help him since one of the only ways to really like end the game against this champion is to try and dive him. He scales like an absolute beast. Him and his younger brother Smolder are just scaling like monsters this patch, so he's definitely going to be going in the S tier, even though I think he's slightly nerfed from the Liandry's and even the Riftmaker changes. I guess the Riftmaker changes don't impact him that much, but definitely the Liandry's change. He's still definitely an S tier champion. You can just stack so easy on this champion right now. Brand is going to go into B tier. The problem with Brand is that, yes, his damage is really high, but he's extremely vulnerable and his range is pretty low. So he's just in a weird spot in the mid lane. Brand will always be in a weird spot in the mid lane until he gets reworked. Next up I have Diana, who's in the B tier as well. She's just a weaker Echo in my opinion. She has the same issues that she has in the jungle, but even worse in the mid lane, where if she can't fight you, then she's useless because she can only go in, right? Next up I have Echo, who I think is quite a bit better than Diana. I think he has decent matchups. If you can get him into like a Syndra or like one of these mages that you can easily get on top of, like the Aurelion Sol as well, then Echo can be very good. But if you get him in a bad matchup, like one of these like burst champions, like even Annie or even Ahri, that the moment you dash on her, she can just charm you, or Yasuo, then Echo will struggle. Echo is one of those champions that you want to get him in a good matchup. Next up we have Fizz. I wish Fizz was stronger, but I can't put him higher than B tier. Again, in the same issue. His third ability just has super long cooldown. His early game is meh. If you can like find ultimates and one-shot the enemy mid laners, you can get really far ahead, but for the most part he will be kind of weak. You guys know I'm the GOAT Fizz player, so if I think Fizz is weak, then trust me, he's probably pretty weak. Otherwise, I'll be playing him a lot more. We're not going to do AP Ezreal in this list, but definitely watch my AP Ezreal video. That champ is insane, but we're keeping it in the meta. Gragas is a decent choice. He shuts down a lot of champions. He has really good wave clear. I definitely think it's a solid choice, especially against some of these mid laners, like the Akali, like the Yasuo, like even the Zed. He can kind of shut down their early game. So he's pretty good and stuff like that. I'm definitely curious if some Psychic Projector Gragas builds end up being OP. Next up we have Irelia, who will run in the mid lane. Irelia is again super matchup dependent. She has really strong early games, but she gets outscaled by pretty much every champion in the mid lane. However, if you know what you're doing on Irelia, I think she's definitely worth picking up. One of the hardest champions in the game too. Jace, very, very strong in the mid lane, probably one of the strongest laners in the game. You are AD, so make sure that your team has some magic damage when you pick him, but he's very good with both his ranged form and his melee form. I don't really know how good Sojin is on him yet because I haven't played with it much, but definitely one of the strongest mid laners just because of how strong his early game is while scaling well and can snowball. So definitely a great choice. Next up, we have Galio. I haven't done enough testing on the tank build yet to really be able to tell you how strong it is. So I'm just gonna leave that into a question mark. His AP build is definitely A tier, but if his tank build ends up being really good with Abyssal Mask, maybe he's even higher than that, but I can't tell you since I haven't done enough testing on it. And I don't want to lie to you guys. Next up, we have Kassadin, who will... I always have him between God tier and S tier, but I think this time I'm going to put him in God tier. I think Kassadin is such an OP champion, man. Obviously, you have to get him in a decent matchup, which he has... most of his matchups are decent. Just don't pick him into, like, Jace, right? But if you can get him in a good matchup, his silence is so OP, he does so much damage, and now he even has Psychic Projector as a choice in the super late game. I mean, you're most likely going for the tier item into Malignance or Rod of Ages, but if you do go the Rod of Ages build, then you can get a little more HP from something like Overgrowth, and you can go for the Psychic Projector as the last item, and you can be super tanky and deal an insane amount of damage. But even without all of that, I think Aston is still just an unbelievable champion. And now with the turrets being a little stronger in the early game, he's harder to dive as well, which would be one of the best things to do against Kassadin that no one really did, was enemy jungler get level 5 and then dive Kassadin before he can get level 5. But that's not really an option. It's not that it's not an option, it's just harder to do with the jungle changes as well. But no one really did that despite being a great counter to Kassadin. Next up, we have Katarina, who is actually a pretty decent pick if you can get her in the right team comp. She's obviously very team comp dependent in the sense of the enemy team comp, right? If they have the tools to shut down Katarina, she'll be useless. But if they don't, then you're completely taking over the game. So she is one of those coin flippy champions that really depend on the enemy team comp. Next up, I have Lux, who's actually a decent choice, I think. Her wave clear mid is really good. I think Lux is a kind of an underrated mid laner. Her passive allows her to not just clear the wave fast, but also do really good trades. You just have to make sure that you have the right setup tools, right? Hitting her first ability is not easy, so ideally you have a team that can kind of set up and already crowd control the enemies for you to hit easy first ability, third ability, ulti combos. And obviously you're very vulnerable to most of the meta junglers too. That can just come in and just one-shot you like Master Yi, Aatrox, Riven, and so on. Next up in the mid lane we have Kayle, who I'm going to put in B tier. Very similar reasoning to the Baron lane explanation. I think Kayle has a lot of potential. I think in the mid lane she actually has slightly better matchups too. So I think if you're going to play Kayle, mid lane is probably the role to pick her. And again, Rageblade does have a lot of potential on Kayle. Next up, we have Morgana, who's gonna be an A tier champion. I do think, she got slightly buffed with the changes to her ultimate. But after the second ability nerfs, she's a little inconsistent, and she also lets a lot of champions scale for free, which is kind of an issue, while not having the same type of like AFK priority that she had in the past before her second ability nerfs. However, she's still a good champion if you are unfamiliar with how to play mid lane. You can just pick Morgana, drop your second ability, and then Black Shield your jungler and hope he carries, right? So she can still have that. Next up in the mid lane, we have Orianna, straight into S tier, excuse me. Orianna is just the perfect mage, right? She's really strong right now, has good burst, good poke, good shielding, good utility. She's just the overall like most overall good champion, right? She has everything, a bit of everything. Even slight mobility with her second ability and movement speed. So she's just gonna go straight into S tier up until further notice. I'm just making sure I haven't missed any champions, like I haven't skipped anyone yet. Next up in the mid lane, I'm not gonna include Seraphine. I don't think she's really a mid laner. We'll include Teemo. We're gonna put him in the A tier. Teemo is a little bit better in the mid lane. He does have pretty weak matchups in general. However, if you do know what you're doing with Teemo, he can be very strong. I mean, you guys saw me play him a lot in mid lane on my 24-hour stream in Sovereign and Legend tier. So obviously you can pull him off in high elo if you kind of know what you're doing on him. He scales like an absolute beast. But yeah, it's mostly like just matchup dependent. You just have to know his matchups very well and make sure you don't pick him into a really, really bad matchup. Next up, we have Twisted Fate. The problem with Twisted Fate, he would be higher if Cleanse wasn't a summoner spell and if Quicksilver didn't exist. You can just run Cleanse against this champion, it becomes useless. I wonder if any on-hit builds with Rage Blade work. I don't think so. But yeah, again, the main issue with, ever since the introduction of Cleanse, Twisted Fate just has felt so underwhelming. Because everyone just picks Cleanse against him and he's just kind of weak because of it. Because he is a stun bot at the end of the day, right? Next up, we have Veigar, my absolute GOAT, one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated champion in the game. Scales like an absolute beast, counters a lot of the meta junglers, right? It's really hard to play Aatrox and Riven into the Veigar. It's really hard to play Viego, Lee Sin. It's really hard to play any of these champions into Veigar that are dash based because of his cage. And even if the enemies get Quicksilver, because of your insane burst, even if they get on top of you, assuming your team is also there, right? Your first ability and ultimate are going to do so much damage that you're just gonna straight up one-shot them with your team. So it's really hard for the enemies to even if they do have Quicksilver for your cage, it's really hard for them to play against you in general. One of the most underrated champions. Definitely S tier. Don't know why people don't put him higher in their tier lists. Next up, I have Yasuo, also in S tier, one of the most insane champions if you know what you're doing, if you can use your dash to jump on the enemies. I mean, you guys have seen some of the best Yasuos play. Even my Yasuo which isn't kind of underwhelming, can stomp Sovereign and Legend games. This champion is just really, really insane if you know how to play him. So definitely gonna put him in S tier. He's just really, really, really strong. He scales like an absolute beast as well. Next up in the mid lane, we have Zed, straight into God tier. I mean, you guys know my thoughts on Zed. I kind of express him in the jungle. Very similar in mid lane. The only difference with mid lane is that until he gets his ult, he's a little weak. So just make sure you don't completely lose the laning phase early. But after you get your ulti, because of your kill pressure, pretty much every lane becomes even. Like, it becomes kind of a matchup of they're trying to poke you down and get decent trades, and you're trying to all in them and kill them. So because of his ultimate, it kind of balances out his laning phase, but his lane is not like his strongest part, right? After he gets a few levels, especially if he gets level 13, and he has his ulti on a 20-second cooldown, this champion is insane. He got another buff with Spear of Sojin as an indirect buff, and a direct buff to his energy, which is really useful for Zed mid lane actually in the early game where you don't have blue buff. So definitely God tier mid laner. If it wasn't for Smolder, I'd say potentially best champion of the patch. Very underrated. I don't know why Zed isn't God tier on everyone's tier list or S tier or whatever they have as their highest tier. Ziggs is gonna go into A tier. Ziggs is a great choice as a mage. He's just very, very vulnerable. You have to play very safe with him. But his ultimate is incredible at being able to just easily access the backline, right? Your team goes in, you can just throw your ultimate in. You can poke a lot, right? Very, very solid at accessing the enemy backline, but I don't think he's as strong as some of the other mages, like the Syndra, like the Orianna, like the Veigar in general. But really, really good for accessing the enemy backline, so it can be really good against champions, even like Smolder or Kog'Maw, Varus that are immobile. Nautilus ults them, drop a Ziggs ult, and you're chilling. Yone is gonna go in the A tier. I'm a little conflicted with Yone, to be honest. I think he's weaker than Yasuo in the mid lane because his early game is a lot weaker. But other than that, he's just like Yasuo. So just his early game that's weaker, but I think that does put him into A tier since his matchups are a little harder. However, if you're a really good Yone player, then you can kind of look past that in my opinion. But I just don't think he's as good as the other champions that function similarly with him, similarly as him, like Zed and Yasuo in the mid lane. Next up, we have Vex, who's gonna go in the S tier. Vex is more of a situational pick, pretty much. If you pick her into a good matchup, like the Yasuo, like the Yone, like the Zed, like the Fizz, like the Echo, pretty much dash-related champions, then you're gonna have a great time. The problem is that Vex struggles against higher range champions like the Orianna, like the Syndra, right? She completely destroys Ahri. So again, Vex is just very, very matchup dependent. This is more of a counter pick, right? Next up, I have Zoe. We're gonna put in A tier. I've thought extensively about Zoe. I think maybe the nerfs weren't as bad as I originally thought. If you're a good Zoe player, you can still be super, super useful and be very, very annoying, but it requires almost perfect play, because if you step out of line even a little bit, you will have a Master Yi and Riven just absolutely running you down, or a Zed. But I do think she's not as bad as the B tier champions, so I'm gonna put her in A tier, but I'd say a pretty weak A tier, honestly. Next up in the mid lane, we have Swain, who's gonna go straight into S tier. Swain, I haven't really seen any tankier Swain builds with Psychic Projector, but his normal Malignance build just does so much damage. Like, and he has so much movement speed as well with like Nimbus Cloak and Ghost. He just runs in there. He's really hard to kite out. I think your best bet in the current meta with his like burst build that he usually goes is to just try and one-shot him. But he's just really, really oppressive with his ulti. But I think the play is to just try and one-shot him if he goes for a non-tank build. If he goes for a tank build, you kind of try and kite out his ultimate, which is pretty hard to do. But he's very, very strong right now. Again, after the rework that they did, where he can like pretty much ult multiple times, it's pretty insane. Like with his ult, he's just insane. When his ult is down, you do have to play a lot safer, but definitely one of the strongest champions this patch. Next up, I have Vladimir, who I'm gonna put in A tier. I tried Psychic Projector on him. I tried some quirky builds. I think still one of the best mages when played properly, but his early game is again just kind of holding him back, and the payoff in the late game is nowhere near as big as other scaling mages like Kassadin, Aurelion Sol, or even Veigar, right? So still really, really good, one of the best champions in the game, but I can't really warrant, or not one of the best champions in the game, excuse me, one of the best scalers in the game, but he's just not as good as the other scaling champions. I would rather have a Kassadin or Aurelion Sol in my team. Next up, we have Zyra, who after her nerfs, I think belongs in A tier. She was really oppressive when she first came out, and I thought that her rework actually made her really, really good. But I think that after her nerfs, she's just kind of underwhelming, to be honest. I think maybe A tier might be a little high for her, especially in the mid lane. And I think that the Liandry's change actually was a pretty big nerf for her too. I think she really liked that true damage against squishies. But I think I'm going to keep her in A tier. I don't think she's as weak as the B tier champions. Next up in the mid lane, we have Syndra, who's going to go straight into S tier. Her burst is just absolutely insane. Her early game is somewhat weak, but she does have good wave clear to make up for it, right? And she has very long range, so she's not as vulnerable as a champion like Vladimir, and she scales absolutely insane. In the late game, the nice thing about Syndra is that because of her high range, she pretty much always has priority in a fight, if that makes sense. Like imagine like a Veigar versus Syndra fight, right? Veigar needs to somehow dodge his stun, Syndra's stun, and still gain range of her and still hit his abilities, while Syndra can just burst him from an insane high range. So because of her high range, Syndra makes it really hard for a lot of champions to play the game. So she's definitely S tier, great scaling mid laner. Talon, I'm gonna throw him in B tier in the mid lane for people who like mid lane Talon, but he's not a very good mid laner, unfortunately. This is what it is. Like he just doesn't have great trades, and yeah, his roams are kind of meh as well in mid lane. I just say play him jungle. He's bounced around jungle, unfortunately. Lissandra in the A tier. The problem with Lissandra is that if she can't one-shot you, then she's not great. Cleanse counters are pretty hard, Quicksilver counters pretty hard. She's great to kind of pair up with your jungler and play around your jungler, but she just doesn't provide as much as other mid lane champions, excuse me. She's very ultimate dependent, and it's kind of a spell that, yes, it's good, it's a point and click stun, but can be very easily dodged with Quicksilver and Cleanse. She's kind of in the same boat as Twisted Fate, I would say. The only difference is that Lissandra has like way more burst, but her burst is just barely not enough to really one-shot anyone. So it kind of puts her in the same boat as Twisted Fate in a sense. Still a decent champion, especially in team fights. Has a lot of potential. It can be a good counter to a lot of like go-win champions that are squishy. Again, like the Master Yi, even though QSS is an issue. Like the Zed, like the Ahri, like the Yasuo, can be a good pick against those types of champions. but obviously struggles in that sense. Can also be good against some of the longer range champions. Like, yes, he gets completely shit on in lane by like Orianna and Syndra, but if you have a good jungler that can play around your stun, you can just jump in with your third ability, ult them, and then hopefully your jungler will take over from there. Next up, in the mid lane, we do have Viktor, who received some decent buffs, but I don't think they were really enough to push him into S tier, but his ulti does do a bit more damage. I just think he's like a kind of a weaker version of Syndra and Veigar right now. Like, I don't really see a reason to pick Viktor over Syndra or Veigar. His early laning phase is a little better against a lot of matchups because his first ability, Shield, kind of allows him to do really good trades. He can poke with his third ability. But his early and especially mid game are just really weak. And once you do finally get to your late game, because you're usually like even or behind, it doesn't feel as overwhelming as some of these other late game scalers. The old buffs were nice, but I do think it requires just a little something more to put him in line with the rest of the really, really strong mages. Speaking of really, really strong mages, we have Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger is a weird pick. I think he's A tier. I think he's really cheesy in a sense. I think his ult third ability is really powerful and a very underutilized spell that can completely win a team fight by itself. Like the Malignant spell with ult third ability spam is really, really good. I just don't think that... I think if you know what Heimerdinger does and you're kind of prepared for it, he's not gonna be very valuable or strong. You just have to make sure you don't put yourself in a position where his ult third ability is gonna completely shred you and win the game. Again, really just jump on him and kill him. His best choice is going Stasis and hoping for the best. But I can't really warrant putting him into S tier, but I think if the enemies don't really know how to play against Heimerdinger, he's really, really powerful. And kind of underrated in that sense. I feel like have I skipped anyone? No, I don't think so. Now, speaking of actual really broken mages, which is who I was going to talk about before I saw Heimerdinger was first, Ryze. Ryze is a champion that I'm so close to putting. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna play him in God tier, but it feels like when I see other Ryze players play, they're just not as good as me. I feel like he's just an underutilized champion. He's like a Twisted Fate that actually does damage, right? Because you have the ultimate where you can go roam anywhere. You have the point and click root instead of stun, but you also have an insane amount of damage and you scale like a monster and you're insanely tanky. I just feel like he's super underutilized. And players just don't really know how to play him. It makes me mad. But I think that Ryze is definitely like, if not God tier, he's like definitely better than all the S tier champions, you know? The main issue with Ryze is his range. He's low ranged. So he does have an issue with a lot of these higher range champions, again, like Veigar, Rihanna, Syndra, and so on. It can kind of bully him in lane, and then team fights kind of hard to play. Like, how are you gonna walk up on Ryze and use your spells versus Orianna? It's gonna pull you in with her shockwave the moment you walk up, right? But if you do know how to play Ryze, his late game damage is absolutely out of this world. And he actually has a relatively good early and mid game, and mid game, which most mages don't really have, right? He has really high consistent damage all stages of the game. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put him in God tier. And I do think Psychic Projector is actually good on Ryze. I think if you go Road of Ages with Overgrowth, that is usually enough in the late game to just pick up... and you will often go, you went Overgrowth on Ryze anyway, so that will be enough. Road of Ages Overgrowth will be enough for you to get 4th item Psychic Projector and have insane damage and be super tanky. So I'm just gonna put Ryze in the God tier. Next up, I have Aurora, who... This is a champion that everybody insists is broken, but I don't really think so. I'm gonna put her in S tier. I used to think that she was honestly weaker than even S tier. I'd put her in A tier in my previous tier list, I think. The problem with Aurora is that her damage, her burst, is just not really enough to one-shot anymore unless you're ahead. And it's kind of hard to get ahead with her because you don't really one-shot anymore. I still think her damage is good, so if you play her well, you can just this overwhelming AoE damage where you can completely catch off enemies and do crazy amounts of damage, but it just feels really hard to get ahead on her, right? While with other mages like Ryze, like Syndra, like Orianna, you can just be even and you just scale like a monster, while I don't think that's necessarily the case for Aurora. And after the enemies start getting the crown, start getting the stasis, you're still very, very vulnerable as a champion, right? Your second ability is not really a lot of mobility. So that's why I usually put her lower, but I think I'm always in between S tier and A tier with her. I'm gonna put her S tier this time. But again, I'm kind of iffy on her. I don't think she's as good as like most other S tier champions. Next up, we have Vel'Koz, who's a solid A tier champion. If you understand the geometry, dude, if you understand the geometry, then Vel'Koz can definitely be super, super broken. The main issue with him is that if you once you get on top of him, he's just useless, right? You just one-shot him and that is it. Goodbye. Finally, we have Smolder, who's not just God tier, but he is the win Smolder tier. He's the best champion of the patch. I do believe he already got some hotfix nerf, right? But it's not enough. He's still the best champion of the patch. I think his best roles are mid lane and ADC. He stacks way too quickly and does way too much damage and was way too safe with his third ability, and the hotfix doesn't really address that. So yeah, and he's probably gonna get nerfed again in the upcoming patch. Definitely God tier, best champion of the patch. If you guys haven't seen my Smolder video, definitely check that out. I'll teach you everything you need to know about how to play him. So yeah, I think that is it for the mid lane. Let me just quickly scan, make sure I didn't miss anyone. I always miss a champion, you guys get super mad. I guess Kennen is a mid laner. I didn't really include him in the mid lane tier list. I'm gonna put him in A tier. The main issue with Kennen in mid lane is that he doesn't have a good wave clear, right? So a lot of these champions can just kind of push the wave and then go do something else. Kennen has to use his third ability to push the wave, but then that makes him vulnerable to just getting traded on. So he's kind of like lane pattern and trading patterns are pretty weak. And that kind of gatekeeps him from being a good mid laner. But if he does get fed, the game is just over because he just opens up his ulti in team fights and just lawnmower sweeps your team. And I think other than that, we should be good in terms of mid lane. I've included the Teemo, so I think we should be good. Okay, let's move on to ADC. Okay, so for ADC is where we have a few changes, and the main changes are the introduction of Rage Blade and I guess Sojourn on a singular champion being Ezreal, and of course we have a new ADC champion. So quite a bit has changed, but I don't think it impacts the tier list that much. It's not like the crit change are completely flipped ADC like upside down. We're gonna start with Ashe, who I think is a solid A tier pick. The main issue that Ashe has is her low mobility and how easy she is to kill for a lot of these meta junglers, mid laners, like the Master Yi, like the Zed, and so on. But her ulti is a very, very valuable spell, so if you know what you're doing with Ashe, you can always be really useful. Corki is also going to go into A tier. His damage is really high. I have seen some Sojourn builds as well, 24 Sojourn builds on Corki with Manamune, which I think can be decent. So Corki is definitely a solid A tier pick in my opinion. Draven is gonna go in the A tier. Draven has an insane amount of early game damage and snowball potential. However, his main weaknesses is how vulnerable he is, and if he doesn't get ahead, then it's kind of GG for Draven. He won't be useful. Caitlyn's another A tier champion. Dude, we're stacking up the A tier. Her range makes her a great lane bully, but she does kind of fall off compared to most other ADCs because she doesn't really have any like steroids, right? She doesn't have any attacks, bonus attack speed from anywhere. Her abilities don't really do a lot of damage. It's only her headshot and her traps that give her like bonus damage. She does kind of get outscaled, but the range does kind of keep her relevant in a sense. So she's still a decent ADC. Our first God tier ADC, Ezreal. So he did lose Riftmaker, right? You don't really want to build Riftmaker on him anymore, but he did gain Sojourn instead. So now he'll actually be pretty tanky with a Manamune Trinity Sojourn build, or you can do Manamune Trinity, Serylda's, and then Sojourn. Blade of the Ruined King is also really good on Ezreal now because it's Omnivamp, right? So he might start going Blade of the Ruined King instead, which procs on his first ability as well. So his poke will be even better. So I think Ezreal is definitely a God tier ADC. I'd say he's the best ADC of the patch, except you know who still exists. Jhin is gonna go straight into S tier. Jhin has a decent early game, right? He can spam his first ability for poke, He has decent wave clear, and he's really good at setting up your team with his second ability and ultimate, but he also scales like an absolute monster. 45 item Jhin does an insane amount of damage, so I think he's definitely a strong S tier ADC. Very, very underrated. I've been playing him quite a bit more recently. Jinx, I'm actually gonna put in A tier. I thought that the changes to Runans making into a crit item would be a little better on her. It's still decent, but it's not like a massive improvement or anything like that. But I still think she's a solid ADC, especially if you can set her up with like a Lulu or something like that. Next up, we have the most overrated ADC in the game, and that's Kai'Sa. Rageblade does help a little bit on some of her build variants, but she's just too short-ranged. Doesn't really have a good laning phase against most champions, and she's just not that useful if she doesn't get ahead, in my opinion. I just think it's kind of overrated, and she doesn't, like, she's a hyper carry, yes, but she's not doing hyper carry damage, if that makes sense, unless she's really fed. Where's the next ADC? Lucian is going to go in the S tier. His burst is insane, especially if you pair him up with an ADC or a support that can set him up for success, like the Thresh, like the Braum, like the Leona, even like a Nami, right? His burst is really, really good, giving him a very strong laning phase and allowing him to be super relevant when he's ahead, which he should be getting ahead because of his strong laning phase. Okay, next up we have Miss Fortune, who's gonna go into the A tier after her most recent nerf. I feel like she kind of lost her early game oomph. Still really good in lane, which is what makes her really good. And of course her ultimate can be game changing, but she's not as consistent as the other ADCs in S tier and God tier, right? So we're gonna put her in A tier, but she's still a really good champion. Which ADC is next? Hopefully I'm not skipping past any. Samira is going to go in the S tier, especially if you can pair her up with like a Blitzcrank, like a Nautilus, a Leona, like a champion that can go in. See a lot of people play Samira with enchanters, and that's probably what makes Samira's win rate not be like really high. But Samira with the right support is absolutely insane, especially in the right matchups. Next up, we have, I guess Sun is not really an ADC. We're going to put her in the support tier list. After Tristana, who's also going to be a solid A tier champion. She's more of a hyper carry scaler. Her early game can be good if you can like get your third ability and get free auto attacks on some champions. But her burst is somewhat lackluster after nerfs that came in the past. But she does scale really, really well. So a decent A tier champion if you enjoy playing Tristana. Next up, we have Varus, who's going to go in the S tier. He got a new core item in Rageblade, so he did lose Riftmaker, which kind of stinks. I feel like Riftmaker is kind of meh on him now, because he does do both physical and magic damage, even though he does mostly do magic damage. You did gain Blade of the Ruined King as an optional on-hit item, so what you can do on Varus now is just rush Blade of the Ruined King with attack speed boots and then go for some like Rage Blade, or you can just do the typical Rage Blade Nashor's Tooth type of build too. That works great too. So definitely an S tier champion after the addition of Rage Blade. Next up we have Vayne, who's also going to be going in the S tier, pretty much due to Rage Blade. Her DPS is out of this world. We're kind of talking about Vayne in the Baron Lane section, but her damage is just insane with Blade of the Ruined King, Rage Blade Terminus build. She just procs her second ability so often, she just completely shreds tanks. You just have to make sure you don't fall behind in the early game because she's really weak when playing from behind. Next up we have Xayah, who's also going to be going in the S tier. Xayah is just a great hyper carry while still being relatively safe, very similar to Ezreal in a sense. Her main weakness is that she's very short ranged, but she's a very good answer to a lot of these meta junglers like the Master Yi, the Riven, the Aatrox, because of how good she is at kiting back. So she can live, I guess, those champions, right? She can kite back, she can ult, she can pull in the feathers. She's a lot harder to kill than most of the other champions. Next up we have Zeri, who there's an argument to be made of putting her in S tier, but I just don't think she's as good as the S tier ADCs. She does have really good burst with her first ability, and she can snowball in lane, and she also does scale pretty good. Again, her main issue is her range is relatively short, so it's kind of easy to get on top of her, while her mobility is high with movement speed, I guess, and her third ability, it's kind of dependent on terrain, so she's a little inconsistent, so I just don't think she's as good as the other S tier ADCs, but she's probably better than most of the A tier ADCs. So I can definitely see an argument for putting her in S tier. Next up, I have Kalista, who's going to go in the A tier. Rageblade is technically a buff on her, but she still feels kind of meh. I've only seen like Jackie really pull her off on the NA server, but she still seems a little underwhelming. Her laning phase doesn't feel that strong, which should be the best part of Kalista. And if she's not really able to snowball, it's kind of easy to just get on top of. Like, her passive doesn't really stop a champion like Master Yi or Riven from just jumping on her and killing her like Zad, right? So I'm going to put her in A tier for now, but I could definitely see an argument for Kalista in S tier as well. I guess I did I include Nilah in my jungle tier list? I don't remember if I did. Anyway, she would have been A tier in jungle, because like, I feel bad because I'm not going to include her in ADC because no one plays her ADC, she mostly plays jungle. I'd say she's probably like an A tier jungler, so I'm sorry for all the Nilah players that I didn't include her in, I guess, any tier list. We're gonna put her in A tier. We're gonna put Sivir in A tier, excuse me. Again, a solid choice. Her ultimate is very useful. She does a lot of AoE damage, but she's not overwhelming as she used to be before her nerfs as well. Still a decent ADC, especially if you want to play for your team. Give them that movement speed, but she's gonna be in A tier. Is that all the ADCs other than Smolder? It might be. I'm gonna do one final check because I feel like I'm missing some. Smolder, God tier, very similar to the reasonings for mid lane, right? Oh, I missed Kog'Maw. Where's Kog'Maw? There's Kog'Maw. He's like last. Again, Smolder, similar reasons to mid lane. He's just overwhelming. He needs to be nerfed. I think the main nerf they need to do is he can't just be getting his burn on 150 stacks, bro. They need to make it harder for him to stack. He's getting his stacks at 10 minutes. He stacks before third dragon. Like, are we serious? This is not even a scaling champion. This is he gets his scaling sooner than Kassadin, man. It's crazy. And Kog'Maw definitely S tier. Potential arguments for God tier as well, in my opinion. One of the best Rageblade users, does an insane amount of damage in the early game. Oh, not in the early game, excuse me, the late game, especially to tanks. And one of the most underrated aspects of Kog'Maw is how much damage his abilities actually do. His first ability, Shred, and then spamming your ultimate, actually crazy amounts of damage. So I could see arguments for Kog'Maw in the God tier, but I think I will place him in S tier. Where's, did I put Twitch? Oh, there's Twitch, okay. Twitch is also going to be joining Kai'Sa in the B tier. The problem with Twitch is he is a hyper carry, but he's just nowhere near as strong as any of the other hyper carries. Why would I ever want Twitch in my team when I could have a champion like Vayne or Kog'Maw or Smolder now, right? And I think that is it for ADC. Sorry to the Nilah lovers. Again, in the jungle, I would put her in A tier, but I think I skipped her. I am not gonna go back and edit that. So yeah, if you were looking for her, this is the explanation on Nilah. And I think that will be it for the ADC tier list. Let's move on to support. Alright, so support didn't really have massive changes. The only real massive change is the addition of Warmogs as kind of an early game item for champions like Thresh or Nautilus. And at the same time, we got the support item changes, which didn't really do anything. They just kind of unified all of the support items. So like, not too much is gonna change on the support role. But yeah, let's get to it. So Alistar is gonna remain S tier. I think I had him S tier last tier list. He's just a very good choice if you know what you're doing. If you go phase rush especially, you can get your knock up, get your combo, and then in a few seconds you're gonna have another combo. So it can be super deadly. He's super tanky, really good roamer, very good all around engage support. Blitzcrank is gonna be an S tier. Even after his nerfs, his damage is just really high for a support. And of course, his grab is possibly the most broken ability in the game. So especially when paired up with a champion like Draven or Samira or Lucian, Blitzcrank can be absolutely deadly. Next up, I have Braum, who's going to be our first God tier champion. Braum is just a great answer to all of these engaged champions that are meta right now, like the Nautilus, the Leona, the Alistar, the Blitzcrank. Braum can jump in, shield your ADC, and just win those trades. He scales really well as well because of his passive being really, really good, constantly applying it to everyone in team fights, getting an almost guaranteed stun as long as you can auto-attack them or use your first ability on them. And then, of course, your ultimate is also great at disengaging fights. Your shield gets a lot of value in fights. So definitely God tier after the buffs I did to him a while ago. Brand, unfortunately, is gonna go into B tier. Mage supports are just not great right now. I think the best mage support is probably Zilean, if that counts, but we mostly like Zilean for his utility, not his damage. I guess Lux might be the best one. The problem with mage supports is not very good right now, especially with how good engage supports are, right? Like picking a mage support into an enchanter is probably your best bet, but you're often ruining your comp if you have like a mage mid. So mage supports are just not in a great spot, I would say. Next up on the supports, we have, I guess Galio is kind of a support. I never put in my support tier lists anymore, I don't think. Because no one really plays Galio support. Same thing with Gragas, like these are good supports, but no one really plays them support. Janna, we're gonna put in A tier. I think Janna is okay. The main issue that Janna has is she's kind of underwhelming. She passively gives a lot of like bonuses with her third ability, which actually gives AD, right? But it's not even targeted, so it usually goes to the wrong person. Her second ability and her passive give a lot of movement speed. Her ulti and her first ability are great disengage tools, but she's just kind of underwhelming compared to how much oomph power other enchanter supports can provide. So a decent pick, but I don't think I can put her any higher than this. Next up, we have Karma. Karma is a great support in terms of both damage and utility. Her second ability, her old second ability, and then old combo is great gank setup. She provides a lot of value with her shield and movement speed. Her, of course, ultimate is really useful in team fights. I think this is kind of an underrated support. And you can go damage build on her too and do an insane amount of damage. So I'm going to go ahead and put her in the S tier. Next up, I have Leona, who's also going to S tier. Leona's damage is absolutely crazy, man. I can't believe that... I can't believe that people don't put Leona in S tier. I rate her super highly. She's one of my go-to supports as well. Her damage is absolutely insane. Her crowd control is super insane. And her second ability makes her so tanky. She gets like free like 200 armor and magic resist, man. This champion is crazy. So definitely an S tier champion in my opinion. Lulu, definitely an S tier champion, especially with how broken the current hyper carries are and Rageblade is. Lulu Yi, Lulu Kog'Maw, Lulu Varus, Lulu Smolder, Lulu Vayne. Yeah, Lulu. So, as long as hyper carries are OP, Lulu's gonna be OP. Simple as that. Lux, again, is a little better than the other mage supports. She does have her shield as well. She does have really good burst, really good range, and good CC. A little better than other mage supports, but nothing to write home about, not like an insanely OP support or anything like that. Morgana, I guess, is a support. We'll just drop her in B tier. You guys know I'm Morgana hater. I think she did kind of receive a small buff with her ultimate changed. I don't even know if that's small buff, honestly. Morgana support is just kind of bad, man. Like, she just doesn't provide enough. Like, she can be okay if your team is really good, because you can just drop the Black Shield on a carry and you can just 1v1. Like, just Black Shield, Master Yi, or Aatrox and just hope for the best. But in reality, she just doesn't provide as much as other supports. So I can't put her any higher than that. Nami, I'm going to put in S tier. And I feel like there's a good argument for Nami to be God tier as well. She's really strong. I just think that the support item changes are actually a slight nerf to her. But she's super, super strong. Definitely check out the wildriftguides.com Nami guide if you want to learn more about Nami, since I'm probably not like an expert on her. Pyke's kind of meh lately because of how strong all of his counters are. You're gonna again check the Pyke guide out on wildriftguides.com, but he's kind of meh because of how strong again his counters are. It's really hard to play him into a lot of these S tier and God tier champions. But if you're a good Pyke and you understand snowballing well, you can absolutely take over games. So I don't think I can justify putting him lower than S tier. Rakan is also going to go into S tier. I think Warmogs actually helps him a lot on his tank build. Really good engage, really good disengage, really good shielding, really good of everything. Now that they've lowered his cooldowns too on, it's not that recent, but they buffed him quite a bit ago. He's been pretty good since then. Senna trained to God tier. Her damage is absurd for a support. She's literally a hyper carry in support form. The main problem that Senna has, and I talk about this in I think in all my tier lists, is that people take bad team comps with Senna. Senna requires a big front line, right? She doesn't want to have a lot of ranged champions. But since you're picking your support, you're probably gonna have range mid, range ADC. Now, if your jungler or top laner also pick range, then it's a complete disaster. Ideally, you have Senna with like a fake ADC, which is like it would be like a Gragas or a Garen or a Nautilus or a Leona, right? So you play her kind of like ADC, but you would get support item, so you can get the stacks. So if you do play her like that, then she's absolutely broken. Nasus is another one, right? You can pair her up with, or even a Rengar, some crazy duos like that. But yeah, that's the main issue that Senna has. If you get the right team comp with Senna and you have like a Jarvan, Wukong, Mundo frontline, then you're winning every game. Okay, make sure I don't skip any. Nautilus, the best engager in the game, right? You just tap your ultimate and you lock down a target. His second ability does insane damage in the early game. All of his abilities have some kind of crowd control. Absolutely crazy champion. Definitely belongs in God tier. Seraphine, just decent champion. Seraphine, Soraka, Sona are probably all A tier champions. They do similar things, they just spam her heals. They're probably a little weaker now after the harmonic changes, right? All of these like spam shield enchanters, they're just not gonna provide as much as Lulu and Nami. So I'm just gonna put all of them in A tier. They pretty much kind of do the same thing, let's be honest. They're just spamming heals and shields. I would say from the three, Sona probably has the most potential because of how insane her late game is. So if you can get her into the late game, she'll have a lot of value. Next up, we have Thresh, who either you know what you're doing and you're a god like Thresh, or you're useless. A very, very high skilled champion. The problem with Thresh is you need to be super high skilled to get the same value that Blitzcrank can get while being kind of bad. So I can't really put him any higher than A tier. However, still a very high skilled, fun, and good champion if you're really good on him. Next up, we have... Do we include Veigar in the tier list? No, we're not going to include Veigar in the tier list. Yuumi. Yuumi is going to go straight into B tier. Again, Yuumi has this issue where if your ADC is a god and you can survive the laning phase, then Yuumi's OP. Or if you can sit on a Hecarim or a Zed or a Master Yi, then Yuumi's really useful. But her laning phase is just so piss weak that you're literally going to always have a losing dual lane unless the enemy team is just completely win trading. Which makes Yuumi, in my opinion, one of the weakest supports in the game right now. I think her rework arguably made her like worse. So I hope they find a better way to balance Yuumi in a way that's just not super unfun to play against when she's good and completely useless when she's bad. Do we include Ornn in the tier list? Ornn is one of the best supports, but no one really plays him. Like, I definitely put him at least S tier, if not God tier, but no one really plays him, so I never really put him in my tier lists. Try to go off play rate, right? Maokai, quite a few people play, really good. I think Abyssal Mask also helps him quite a bit as kind of a extra supportive item that will increase like your other AP sources damage. Surprisingly good support that I don't see that often anymore, but shout out to my friend Maokai, I think is really, really good. Milio, straight in God tier. Milio is absolutely insane, the best enchanter in the game. He's like Lulu on steroids because he also gives range. Really, really good with Kog'Maw, obviously, but good with every hyper carry, which is kind of like the ADC meta as well. One of the best champions in the game right now. Zilean, also straight to God tier. His ult is absolutely insane as a utility spell to counter engage. His third ability is a great spell to counter engage, kind of stops a lot of these like meta junglers that want to run at you, right? Really, really OP champion against Heavy Engage, very similar to Braum in a sense. He's just doing it in a different way, right? Braum supports you with your shield, Zilean lets you die and then revives you. But another very, very good choice. Kind of lost track of where I was. If I didn't skip anyone. Zyra is gonna be same thing with Brand. After her rework, she was really OP, but then she became kind of weaker, and mage supports are just not great right now. So she's kind of in the same boat as Brand, even though she does offer, I think, maybe a little more in terms of utility with her AoE root, I guess, and ulti knockup. Bard is going straight into God tier. Insanely broken support that does a crazy amount of damage. A good Bard that can absolutely take over games. Probably the him and Sen are probably the two hardest carry support champions. He just does way too much damage, man. He does way too much damage for a support. He roams around with his little chimes. His ulti, when used well, is one of the most OP abilities in the game. So definitely a solid God tier champion. And is that it for supports? I feel like I'm missing someone. Let's quickly run it over. Ashe is not a support, even though she is fun to play on the support role. Nope. 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 I guess we got everyone. Right? I think that might be everyone. Malphite's not a support. I usually put him in D tier just to discourage people from playing him. Oh, we're missing Rel. Okay, we're missing Rel. Rel, I think, is kind of a meh engager, to be honest. I just think she's a lot weaker than Nautilus and Leona and Blitzcrank and Alistar. So I can't really warrant putting her higher than A tier. Even Maokai is just a better, more solid engager. It's kind of hard to hit her abilities, but if you can find a good combo on Rel, it's very satisfying. But I don't think I can warrant putting her any higher than A tier. So yeah, not much change on the supports either, I would say. But that is it for my patch 7.0 tier list. I would love to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts on any of these champions. Let me know if you think I've underrated or overrated any champions. Let's figure out this meta together and get our dream ranks of this season. Thanks so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe for more Wild Rift videos.